How's that? As we've mentioned several times, Luke has some accounts that are not found in Matthew, Mark, or John. And so that's kind of interesting that we've got some unique parables and stories in Luke. This morning we're going to talk about the rich man and Lazarus. If you're looking at your study guide, we're on lesson 10. If you don't have that, that's fine, because we'll just stay right in Luke chapter 16 this morning. Luke chapter 16. You know the story, but let's read it again to set the context for our discussion. Luke chapter 16, verse 19. There was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass that the beggar died and was carried by angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. And in hell he lift up his eyes, being in torments, and seeth Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest thy good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted, and thou art tormented. And besides all this, between us and you there's a great gulf fixed, so that they which would pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from thence. Then he said, I pray thee therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. Abraham said to him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, Nay, Father Abraham, but if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said to them, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. All right, we know this text well, this familiar passage to us. We've got to start out with the question of, is this actually a parable? Does this deserve to be included in the list of parables that Jesus taught? Now, typically it is. Typically when we're talking about parables, we'll include this one. But there's a little bit of a problem with that. And let me suggest to you what part of that trouble is. If you ever have the occasion to talk with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you should, if you have a chance to talk to them, talk to them. They're off on a lot of Bible doctrines. One of the things that they're off on is they believe that wicked people, when they die, are just annihilated, cease to exist as beings. They also believe that even the righteous dead have no conscious existence beyond the grave. That the righteous who will be rewarded later will actually be reincarnated or remade, refashioned. God will remake. I think they say He will remake them from His memory of their existence. But they don't believe that even the righteous have a conscious existence beyond the grave, and they believe the wicked just get annihilated. They obviously don't have an existence beyond the grave. So this story that Jesus told of the rich man and Lazarus proves all of that wrong, right? Because we have a wicked man and a righteous man, and both are obviously conscious in existence beyond the grave. And so this is the go-to passage. This is where you want to go if you're talking to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Their comeback, I guarantee you, their comeback will be, well, that's just a parable. That's just a parable. Couple of things. First, let's grant that first. Let's say that it is a parable. Does it teach a lie? Jesus teaching something not true by way of parable? That doesn't work, does it? Would Jesus tell something that is completely false, doesn't have a shred of truth to it, in a parable? That doesn't even make sense, does it? So first of all, if you grant them, and I've often done that, so let's grant that it's a parable. It would still be telling the truth, wouldn't it? They have a lot of trouble with that. The second thing is this actually doesn't fit real well in definition of parable. There's some things unique about this story that aren't like any other parables. For instance, the man Lazarus is named. So one of the characters is actually named in this. That doesn't happen in any parable, any other parable that Jesus ever taught. Does it ever mention someone by name? Okay? So this is told more like a true historical account. This is told more like Jesus actually relaying what actually happened to two men after they died. I don't even think it's worth arguing about. Whether you want to believe that these were two actual men, the rich man and Lazarus, or these are two characters in a parable that Jesus taught, to me it makes no substantial difference because it is the truth one way or the other. Any thoughts or comments on that, anybody? All right, so be aware that when you talk to, because this is where you want to go, right? This is the passage you want to go to prove that there is conscious existence beyond the grave. But be aware, they'll try to completely disregard it by calling it a parable. In my opinion, that doesn't help them at all. All right, so that's a first consideration. Now, our author asks us to describe the conditions that these two men lived in while alive on earth. And verse 19 says, the rich man was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. Purple, of course, we are aware of that purple, the dyes that made clothes purple were very expensive and special, and I don't think Bob paid extra money for his purple shirt this morning, but if you did back then, you would have paid big price. Purple was reserved for kings and noblemen. So this guy is obviously very wealthy, clothed in purple and fine linen. I can never read it. I almost have to be careful when I read this. The King James says he fared sumptuously every day. Years and years ago, I remember a young man who was doing the Bible reading as services began. And when he read that, he says the rich man was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared scrumptiously every day. Well, it probably was scrumptious. I imagine it was scrumptious as well as sumptuous. This guy was really wealthy. All right, so his condition, as described, is about as good as it gets. His life on earth was as good as it gets. All right, he's doing fine. There was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores and desiring to be fed with the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. So Lazarus is in about as bad a shape as you can describe. And clearly, if this is a parable, Jesus chose those two extremes to highlight his lesson. But these are not, unimaginable circumstances. This is very, very possibly real. A very rich man and a very, very poor man who actually was begging for crumbs. Now, I think hang on to that, because I think we're going to want to make a point about how he was begging for the rich man's crumbs. I got to tell you another little highlight here, a little humorous part of this. There was a guy, and he named his dog Moreover. And he said he took it from this passage where it says, moreover, the dogs came and licked his. He named his dog Moreover because he thought it was a Bible name for a dog. Okay, that's enough of that. But anyway, Lazarus was in about as bad a shape as you get, right? Begging for crumbs. So they died. And the next question, the author asks us to contrast their condition after they died. So verse 20, a point has been made. I'm not sure how much to make of it. But in verse 22, it came to pass that the beggar died, was carried by angels into Abraham's bosom. Now, I think that this passage gives us some insights to what happens after we die. I think that's one of the things this passage is really valuable for, gives you some insight. So what do you expect when you die? What do you think will happen? That's intriguing to me. And there have been several times when I've had occasion to visit with and talk to people who were at death's doorstep, so to speak. They knew and we knew and everybody knew that they were soon to pass. And very often somebody in that condition is not conscious, not able to communicate, but sometimes they are. And the few instances where I've had a chance to talk to people, talk about what you're about to see, what's about to happen. What will it be like when death comes and when you cross, or as we sometimes say, cross over? That's a real interesting thought to me, and I've thought about that, and what nobody knows for sure. Nobody who's ever experienced it, nobody we know who's ever experienced it has ever told us about it. There's some people who talk about near-death experiences and so forth. I don't think they're legitimate. I think the mind probably plays some real games with people who are at the point of death, but I don't think any of those near-death experiences, I preached a sermon about that a good while back. I don't think any of those are legitimate, that's not real information about what happens after death. This is. The angels carried him. The angels came and carried him to Abraham's bosom. So if you're living faithfully and righteously, one of the things that you could anticipate when you die is that the angels will come and take your spirit, your soul, and carry you into the Hadean world. We're going to talk about that Hadean world here in a minute. But the angels will attend to you when you die. That's interesting. That's a little glimpse of the afterlife. It's not a lot of information. How does that happen? What would they do? What would they look like? I don't know. It doesn't say. But that's just a little bit of information about the after-death situation. It's interesting that it says about the rich man, it just says, he died and was buried. Angels didn't attend to him. Thomas?
How do we know that this is not talking about, or how do we know that this is a parable that Jesus?
Well, we dealt with it. We already talked about that just before you got back. It's different. It could be. I'm not saying it couldn't be. It could be, but it's different from any other parable in the details it gives, especially in naming one of the people. So I take it that it's not a parable. It could be. To me, it doesn't matter. It's still teaching truth. It's not teaching anything false. Tom?
When you look at this, and the part that we were just talking about, the angels turned away, and then when Jesus was on the cross, he died and was having a conversation with various criminals, and the one said, "Remember me in my kingdom." He said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," sort of indicating that the place that they were both going to go at death was this place that he's talking about there in.
So this place that Lazarus, he was carried to Abraham's bosom. This text calls it Abraham's bosom. Jesus called it paradise when he was on the cross speaking to the thief. He called it paradise. This day thou shalt be with me in paradise. So I would firmly believe that paradise and Abraham's bosoms are two descriptions of the same place. Two descriptions of the same.
Go through sort of emphasize that Jesus is talking something that is, it's going to happen sort of with him, where he's going to go, or talks about that, and it gives hope to those that are, faithful, and those that aren't, in this place. It's
Okay.
Prejudgment type situation.
Yeah. So the King James is bad. The King James is bad at verse 23. In hell he lift up his eyes. All your better, newer translations are going to say Hades. And there's a difference between Hades and hell. So hell is the eternal place of punishment after judgment. Hades, it's a lot of times people have the idea that Hades is bad. Hades is not necessarily bad. Hades is, I think, a very good description of Hades. Hades is the realm of departed spirits. Okay, so when your spirit leaves your body. By the way, that's the biblical definition of death. You know, medical experts now, because they can artificially, keep a man's heart beating and so forth, in modern terms, it's sometimes hard to detect when does the person actually die. Maybe when the brain waves stop and so forth and so on. But the heart is still beating. Is he dead or is he alive? So men can debate that from a medical standpoint, but from a biblical standpoint, the definition of death is when your soul departs your body. Okay. So when your soul departs your body, where does it go? It goes to Hades. Everybody goes to Hades. Every departed spirit goes to Hades. That's where the rich man and Lazarus went. In Hades, there are two parts. One part, notice it says there that, I'll skip down to verse 25, Lazarus is comforted. So there's a place of comfort for the righteous who die. And in this context, it's called Abraham's bosom. And as Tom pointed out, Jesus referred to it as paradise, or a place of paradise, a wonderful place, a place of comfort, this text says. So when you die, you can expect that you're going to go to one of two places, both of them within the sphere called Hades. So Hades is just very simply defined as the realm of departed spirit. It's not necessarily bad. You're going to go to Hades, but you might be, hopefully you will be, in Abraham's bosom. You'll be in a place of comfort. You'll be in a place that Jesus called paradise if you have lived righteously. So Hades is not all bad, but there is a place of torment. That's where the rich man went. Wait.
Yeah, so that's not the only place where it talks about that the angels will come. So in the parable of the tares, in Matthew chapter 13, in verse 41, when he's explaining the parable, he says, the Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So in other places he talks about that the angels will be the reapers. They will be...
Yeah, I think that's more talking about judgment than it is about death. When so if I were to die today and time goes on, in other words, earth is not... I'm just talking about for every person who dies, there'd be thousands. You can look that up. How many people die on earth every day? I don't know. It's thousands. I'm not sure how many. But of those who are dying before the end of time, for the righteous, it says the angels will somehow escort them or carry them, it says here, to a place of comfort. It's interesting, but that's all we know about it. That's all we know. Yeah, and we're going to see, as Gordon points out, we're going to see that it's fair to say that your destiny is sealed at this point. At this point, nothing is going to change the condition of your soul. You will be in torment in Hades until the resurrection, and then you will be assigned to eternal hell. I was going to talk about that at the last lesson, but let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So, Hades and hell. Hades is the realm of departed spirits. Hell is the eternal place of the dead. If you die and you've not been faithful to serve God in your life, you will go to Hades. You will go to this place of torment. There you will wait for the resurrection and the final judgment. Look in John chapter 5. In John chapter 5, verse 28, John 5:28, Jesus said, "Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in the which all that are in the graves shall hear his voice and shall come forth. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation." So the wicked are going to be resurrected too, right? The righteous will be resurrected unto eternal life. The wicked will be resurrected into eternal damnation. So this Hadean world will exist, this Hadean realm will exist until the final judgment. And when the final judgment takes place, all will be resurrected from the graves. Judgment, eternal judgment will take place. The righteous will go to heaven to be eternally with God. The wicked will be assigned to eternal damnation in hell. Look in Revelation chapter 20. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 11, here John is describing the judgment scene as it was revealed to him. John 20, verse 11, I saw a great white throne and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell, Hades, there's another bad. King James is terrible in translating hell and Hades. This is Hades. This is actually, there's a difference between the two words in the Greek. This is the word Hades. So death and Hades delivered up the dead that were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. And death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So again, here Jesus is teaching. And boy, King James really hurts us in the way they translate hell and Hades. They really hurt understanding in that. Hades exists until the final judgment. And when the final judgment takes place, notice, Hades is destroyed as well. Hades ceases to exist at that point. Look in Matthew chapter 25. In Matthew 25, Jesus clearly describing the judgment scene. Matthew 25, verse 31, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. So here's the judgment scene. Notice all, it says there, verse 32, then before him shall be gathered all nations. Everyone's going to be there. Skip down to verse 46. These, he says, so he's talking about the wicked, these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous unto life eternal. So that at the final judgment is when that division takes place. But Luke chapter 16, now back to our text. We need to get back to our text here. Our text tells us that there's actually a separation that takes place as soon as you die. As soon as you die, you're going to go to Hades. But in Hades, you will either be in Abraham's bosom, comfort, paradise, or you'll be in a place of torment, awaiting the resurrection call. When the resurrection call comes, all that are in the grave shall come forth. Eternal judgment will take place. The wicked will go to eternal hell. There's a difference between Hades and hell. They'll go to hell, and the righteous go to heaven. Did I say a hand? Eric.
Does the Bible differentiate the place of torment and hell? Does it talk about any differences between the two? Because he's in torments here.
Yeah. Well, this is part of Hades, and there where we read in Revelation 20, Hades is going to be destroyed. So, but eternal hell, everlasting, the word everlasting is used there in Matthew 25. So the difference between them at least is one is temporary and one's eternal. I would say the punishment is, I don't think I could go someplace and prove that the punishment is exactly the same. It's awful in both places, but I don't know if I could prove that the punishment is identical.
And Hades is not the lake of fire. I don't think.
The lake of fire is hell. Okay. All right, Tom?
Just look at the consciousness that's there in that realm of the dead. And when you look like, the things, the pictures that we have, the eternal things, there are certain things that, is not going to be what, who are we really to remember those that weren't faithful, or is God going to change us some way that way? Here we look at the one that was not faithful. He realized the situation. He could see the comfort, and he made requests and was told that couldn't happen. Then he makes other requests about going back. So, at this time here, it looks like there's a consciousness or an awareness both ways.
Absolutely. Conscious existence beyond the grave is definitely taught. Exactly right. All right, so the condition of the rich man after he died, verse 23, he lifted up his eyes being tormented, seeth Abraham afar off, Lazarus in his bosom, and he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. So to Eric's question, I don't know if this is the same torment as eternal hell will be. I can't imagine much difference, but we know how bad it was here. He said he was tormented in a flame, and what he hoped for, what he longed for was just a drip of cold water on his tongue. It's hard to imagine that measure of torment, but that's what he was hoping for. Here's a little interesting side note. The word, I'm reading King James, send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water. The word dip there is the Greek word baptizo. That's the same word for baptize. So if you're going to take your finger and get water to move it from one place to another, in this case he said, let him put his finger in water and put a drip on my tongue. How would you do that? How would you get the water on your finger? So here's the water, here's my finger. I'm going to get some water and I'm going to sprinkle a little on my finger, and then I'm going to carry it. Oh, you wouldn't do that, would you? You would stick your finger in you would submerge, you would immerse your finger in the water to get a drip to carry over to some other place. It's kind of interesting. It just illustrates the true meaning of the word baptizo. It means to dip or plunge or immerse. It's actually translated in the King James as dip here. So that's interesting. So again, if you're describing the condition of the rich man, he's now, having been in a great, wonderful condition in life, he's in a terrible condition now. But in the case of Lazarus, he says, Abraham said, Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest good things, likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted and thou art tormented. So all it really says about Lazarus' condition is that he's comforted. But that word in itself is wonderful, all things considered. Now, I thought the author asked an interesting question. So what kept Lazarus from being able to go and do that? What kept the rich man from being able to be rescued out of that and come to where Abraham and Lazarus? By the way, Abraham's existence also proves life beyond the grave, right? Abraham had been dead for centuries, probably close to 2,000 years, and he still existed. And he speaks in this story, he speaks. But what would keep Lazarus from going there or the rich man from going to there? What's it say? Wade?
I just want to ask a question. So what you were saying a while ago about the parable issue is that typically in parables, real people are not named in parables. In this situation, Abraham is named, and we know Abraham is a real person.
Yeah.
Is that what you were saying?
Well, yeah, but especially Lazarus too. In particular, Lazarus is the one I was emphasizing. But yeah, Abraham is mentioned too. Yeah. So what's the barrier here?
There's two, actually. First is life and live.
There you go. That's what I was looking for.
Then there's a chasm that keeps, there's no way across it.
Yeah. So the thing we usually key on, Abraham says, there's a great gulf fixed between you and us. We can't come to you, you can't come to us. So there's some kind of barrier. Now this is not the physical world, right? This is the spiritual world that we're describing. But Abraham describes some great barrier between, he calls it a great gulf fixed, so that we cannot come to you, you cannot come to us. But I think James makes an important observation. in response to that request that the rich man made, Abraham says, first thing he says, remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest good things, likewise Lazarus evil things. So there's a reference made to his former life. And in his former life, he had not been a righteous man. That's why he can't come out of torment. And as I said, we also focus on that gulf fixed, some kind of divider that makes it impossible. You can't cross between. But I do think it's very significant that the first thing Abraham references is how you live. Remember earlier it said Lazarus was begging for crumbs. Well, why do you have to beg for crumbs? If this guy was, apparently Lazarus was a righteous man, right? Why would a righteous man have to beg for crumbs from a rich man's table? Why wouldn't the rich man say, feed that guy? He's at my gate. Notice it says he was laid at his gate full of... Why wouldn't the rich man say, take some of my abundance of food, my scrumptious food, and go feed that guy? Right? He apparently never did. And part of and so that's just indicative of the selfish, self-centered life that he had lived. Now he's paying the price. Wait.
So this may be what Gordon was referencing a while ago is, can we remember things that we did on earth when, after death? And I think this shows that we do have a conscience, even though we have consciousness. And sometimes, I even think that, as far as, sometimes people say, well, so-and-so is looking down upon us. You hear that question or that statement sometimes. Does my grandfather, who I never knew, care about what I'm doing at this point? I think his focus is more on what's going on in heaven. But does my grandfather know what happened to him or the things that went on in his lifetime? Yes, I think he probably does.
I think there's a remembrance. I take the position, it's an arguable position, but I take the position that we will recognize one another in eternity, that we do remember our earthly existence. I think yes to that. Oh man, we're going to run out of time. The big problem with that is, so I get to heaven, and my wife is not there. My wife or my child, some loved one is not there. How can I be happy in heaven if I know I'm there and my wife is not there? How will that be? That's a hard question to answer, and I don't pretend to have a full explanation. I think one of the things that make that so is, in heaven we'll have complete and full knowledge and comprehension, and we'll understand as God understands such things. We'll understand the righteous judgment of God. It will make it so that we don't grieve over things like that. That's not a truly satisfying answer, I think. But our existence in heaven is going to be way different than our existence here, and our level of knowledge and understanding will be immensely different than what we have here. James?
We go a long time with this, but one thing I think we fail to think about is when we're in the presence of God, that probably is going to be our main focus, right? We might have remembrances, but we might not care as much because we are now God.
Yeah.
And being with Him matters more than anything. He can make it. There's no tears, there's no sadness. He's going to fix whatever that problem is. If there is consciousness, He'll fix it. We're going to be with God.
Good. I think that's right. All right, let's go quickly. We're going to run out of time. We already talked about the impossibility of change. So, again, as I said earlier, this account indicates that when you die, it's done. When you die, your eternal fate is sealed. Now, you're not going to your eternal place yet. You're going to Hades. When judgment comes, you'll go either to heaven or hell. That will be eternal. But as soon as you die, your fate is sealed. There's nothing going to change that. Go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. For we must all, emphasize again, all, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that every one may receive the things done in his body according that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. You're going to receive according to the things done in your body. When you're dead, you're not in your body anymore. So that's a done deal, right? The record has been filled out. There won't be any more information that is factored in after you're dead. So as we live here and now, we will determine what our eternal fate will be. Although if we die before the Lord returns, if we die before Judgment Day, we're going to go to Hades and we're going to wait there until the resurrection call. But we will know, you will know. I think this is interesting. You won't be that, man, oh man, I'm dreading Judgment Day because, man, I just don't know what's going to happen on Judgment Day. No, you will know. That's probably part of what makes the torment even worse in Hades is you're going to know whether oh man, I'm here now and I'm going to hell forever. If you've not been living for the Lord, that's the way it will be. Tom?
Interesting. One of the Catholic doctrines that sort of progressed came out of this concept of the payment of indulgences. If you had a loved one that died, a little questionable, you could pray and pay some money, and that would be taken care of. We don't see that taught anywhere.
And that's their doctrine of purgatory.
Yeah.
So if you're not a good person, maybe you're not a horrible bad person either, you'll go to this intermediate area of purgatory. And then if you're, like you say, if your living loved ones will pay money and say prayers, you could be moved on up after you're dead. That is total fabrication. That whole notion, I mean, there's not even a hint of that in the Scriptures. In fact, just the opposite is taught.
The other thing to notice about the account here is if you read it just quickly through, you might think that all rich people are going to torment and all poor people are going to paradise.
Oh, I didn't think about that. So would you take it that Jesus is saying rich people are doomed to hell?
Yeah.
Not necessarily
And
so.
not necessarily because there's other teachings.
Sure, that's right. That's right.
And there's another question too is, just thinking about why would the Pharisees and the leaders look to put Lazarus to death? There are a couple reasons. Of course, if we take this and the other accounts where Jesus talks about, situation of paradise, when he raised Lazarus from the dead, that was 3 days later.
Yeah, I don't think this is the same Lazarus.
No, I'm not saying the same Lazarus.
Okay.
I'm just saying that here Lazarus was in this paradise. Did he have the consciousness of that when he was raised from the dead?
So could the brother of Mary and Martha, Lazarus, could he have said, man, I was there and this is what it was like? That would have been a true near-death experience, or actually death experience, and he's resurrected. It's interesting that we never have his recorded words about that. And so I think that makes it clear that's not for us. What he might have seen or known or been able to relate is not for us because it's not recorded.
And then we also have the account of those that were in the tombs that rose at the same time as Christ that went around the city, people saw them. You have that situation too. Does that build on the believer's concept of eternal life?
I don't know. I don't understand that. You brought up something I don't understand. I don't know.
But like I say, I think this here, Jesus is telling this story, this account, to let people know that there's that
Absolutely.
death, and there is that judgment is there. And so the way that you live is the concept of
Where you'll spend
where
eternity.
you're going to spend.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, so we're just out of time, but real quickly, so he's not going to get the drip of cool water on his tongue. That's not possible. He can't get that. So then he says, verse 27, I pray thee, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brethren, that he may testify to them, lest they also come to this place of torment. So now his thoughts, nothing can be done for his condition. Now he's worried about his kinfolk back home. send Lazarus back to them at least to tell about this place so that they won't have to come here too. And Abraham's response to that is no. And he says, they have Moses, Abraham says, they have Moses and the prophets. He says, no, the rich man argues, no. Father Abraham, if one went to them from the dead, they will repent. And Abraham says, if they won't listen to Moses and the prophets, they're not going to listen even though one rise from the dead. So that's not going to happen either. Wait.
So I think there's two things that you can see from that passage there. One thing it shows is that Abraham is restricted in what he can do. Obviously, God, if God wanted to, God could eliminate the child, right? He could send him wherever he wanted to go. But Abraham, he realizes that he can't do anything with that. So he's restricted. He's just a mortal. He's just a person, just like everybody else is. And also, I think it also knows, this is kind of what you were saying before, is that we will know all things at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the rich man didn't know. But maybe will the people in hell know?
I think they'll know why they're being... I mean, Abraham reminded him of why, but that's not to indicate he didn't know why he was there. So I think one of the torments of eternal punishment will be knowing it didn't have to be that way. You could have done differently. Just in my way of thinking, I think that's one of the things that'll make it all the worse, that you had a chance and you didn't take it. And now this is what you suffer. We're out of time. I've always kind of thought it was interesting. Jesus is telling this account, but he adds, they would not be persuaded though one rose from the dead. Jesus was raised from the dead, and the vast majority of the people of the world are not persuaded. So the truth of that statement is borne out in the reality of what's happened since Jesus was raised from the dead. Jesus was raised from the dead, and the vast majority of the world's population still doesn't believe that eternal judgment is coming. So I think Abraham told the truth there. He said, no, they won't believe. They won't believe even if one's raised from the dead. You know, if you think about Moses and the prophets, he said, they have Moses and the prophet. Moses did all kinds of amazing miracles. The prophets performed miracles and revealed truth from God. They were being ignored. It's not like, but if we step up the game, so they've got Moses and the prophets, but we could step it up by raising this Lazarus guy from the dead. Who's Lazarus? They got Moses and the prophets. They're ignoring Moses and the prophets. Why would they listen to Lazarus? I think that's kind of the argument that's being made. And it's true. And history has borne out the fact that they don't listen, even though one is raised from the dead. Good comments, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll wrap up this study of parables in the Gospel of Luke next week. We'll be looking at lesson 11, the persistent widow and the Pharisee and the tax collector. Thanks, everybody.